Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today is Zareh Sinanyan. He is the mayor of Glendale, or Little Armenia as we know. Welcome to CivilNet, Zareh.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Good to see you here in Yerevan. You have a very interesting sort of career path and life. You were born and raised in Yerevan. You're a Yerevansi.
I was.
Boy when you left in which year?
1988.
In 1988.
I just turned 14 years old. And our family moved to the United States. My father was not very fond of the Soviet system, and we had relatives in the U.S. and like many repatriates from the diaspora who would come over in the 40s, our family moved to the United States to live in a more free political and economic system.
Mm-hmm. This was before the Soviet Union collapsed. This was probably before the war.
It was at the inception of the Karabakh movement, but in terms of the, the longevity of the Soviet Union, at that point, no one questioned it.
No one questioned it. And you were 14 years old. That's a really difficult age to move countries, never mind neighborhoods or even schools. So I can imagine how difficult those first years must have been for you there.
Very difficult, different culture, and we moved to Burbank, of all places, which back then had an Armenian population of maybe 50 people. I went to junior high school. I started junior high school, and there were maybe 5 Armenian kids there. So practically speaking, there were none. And it was sink or swim. I was given my schedule of classes and said, I was told, go to your class. And
well, you swam, obviously.
I swam. I had to swim, and I did so. And I have my father to thank for that. And because before starting school, I insisted on going somewhere in Glendale because I knew I had cousins there. And he said, no, you're going to go here because you're going to learn English properly and you're going to succeed, and this is the best way to do it. And he was right.
And 25 years later, almost 25 years later, in April of this year, you were elected as mayor of Glendale. That's a pretty cool accomplishment, huh?
It's a pretty significant responsibility. That's the way I look at it, because you're in essence responsible. You're where the buck stops for a city of 200,000 people, and it's a big honor. It's a great honor, which I try to justify every day by the way I conduct myself as mayor and make sure that I work for the benefit of everyone that lives there, including the 90,000 Armenians that do.
Yeah, you were saying earlier that 45% of the population of Glendale is Armenian.
Approximately. The census shows 39%, but the city clerk's tax on, that's his argument, an extra 5% because of underreporting or unreported residents, and so the number is about 44 to 45%.
Well, before we talk about some of the municipal responsibilities and obligations that you have as mayor, how is it, was politics something that you knew from an early age was an area or profession, a career that you were going to follow? Absolutely not.
I never aspired to be a politician. I liked politics, political history as a concept. I wouldn't be against teaching it someday, somewhere, for example. But in terms of me, myself, actually engaging in active politics, that thought didn't really occur to me. But I think I was perhaps in denial in many ways, because when I look back at what interested me and what I did actually with my free time, I think the writing was on the wall. I just didn't really read it. For example, earlier on when other kids would take summer vacations and would go travel or would go here and there, and I chose to come to Armenia, for example, in the early 90s when nobody would come here, and volunteer here and there, from National Assembly to the presidential staff. That was my passion. I felt like that was the outlet for my interests.
Because a lot of people who do leave Armenia, and sadly the numbers are not encouraging or promising, they leave and oftentimes they don't come back, but you chose to come back. And not only that, you have 4 children, and you bring them back every year almost.
I do, and I think that's the only way you can ensure, by living in the diaspora, of course, that your kids maintain their cultural heritage at the least. And it works, because otherwise my kids, go to public school with where the students are a representation of the face of Glendale, which is a mix of many nationalities, which is as it should be. And they come home, they speak English to each other. And by sending them here, bring them here and having them spend a month or 2 months here, I make a dent in that process and make sure that at least linguistically, at least their understanding of what their ancestral homeland is there. I secure that part of it. The rest, the life will show.
Zareh, I want to get back to sort of the nuts and bolts of what you do. As someone who does come to Yerevan every year, there has been progress in the city. There are better roads, more buildings. I don't know, I mean, infrastructure changes, public spaces, not so much as we would like. Someone who is now leading an administration that takes care of a city in California, the largest state in the United States, do you see similarities? Do you see the progress, the knowledge that you have or are going to acquire in these coming years as mayor? I want to see if there are parallels here that you are seeing.
Maria, if I engaged in the detailed conversation of tit for tat kind of a comparison, I think we would be here forever. I'll say that as a general rule, what I've observed from conversations with individuals who are, for example, members of the Avakani for the city. I guess that's the equivalent of city council.
Right. We call it city of council of elders.
Elders, yes. And my own observations, of course, that there's the biggest difference is in the sort of absence of process that involves the residents. And that reflects itself in everything else that happens in the city. For example, I was talking to one of the elders, and he indicated that residents are not allowed to city council meetings. That's beyond me. I mean, of all the forums that a resident of a city should be allowed to, that's the city council meeting, because at the end of the day, whatever's decided there is going to impact them directly or indirectly. So that that's sort of, I think that sums it up pretty much. And,
so
and
when
you look at specifics, lack of transparency. When you look at specific decisions that are made, I question some of them because they're just mind-boggling. I mean, installing a communist butcher's statue, for example, in the city of Yerevan, who's on the record. There are letters showing that he was working to destroy the Republic of Armenia. That, or the way green space is destroyed or appropriated here, or the way a building all of a sudden arises in the middle of someone's backyard. It shows that just there's no process. The same thing, for example, would engage a public notice that someone's trying to do that in the city of Glendale. The notice would involve a public hearing. A public hearing, then whatever the results were would be summed up by the staff, would be passed on to the appropriate commission, because we have various commissions that sort of filter everything that comes to council. The commission would vote on it one way or another, would make a recommendation to city council. If it's a vote, then whoever's impacted by it could appeal it to city council. So there would be layers and layers and layers upon which a resident would be able to defend their rights vis-a-vis any decision that's being made by city council. Here it seems like a decision's made single-handedly, and then the residents find out when it's too late, and they have to somehow react. There has to be public outcry, which is, I think, the backwards way of doing it. I mean, it should be the other way around.
Sure, because oftentimes then those engaged citizens or activists who do find out about a certain construction or a decision made by the Council of Elders or the Yerevan mayor, as you said, it's too late. They go and they fight to change the decision. They can't, they lose. And it contributes to a sense of disillusionment.
Right.
So how many times
sense of
can
inability to impact their own lives.
And I think that once our government, whether that's on the municipal level or the national level, realize that engaging the citizenry in the decision-making process only benefits the country.
Of course it does. And that's the postulate. I mean, that's the fundamental, basis of democratic society, where you are, as someone who's in the governing position, you have a social contract with those who put you in that position, you voters. And you are accountable to them. I mean, everything you do should be in accordance with, if not the desires of the population, but at least the population should be engaged in the process that results in the decision. And I think if that component could be fixed, everything else would be fixed accordingly.
Yeah, because the decisions made by any municipality in any country, in any city in the world, impact citizens on a more tangible level than deciding foreign policy, for example. It's from garbage collection to lighting on the streets, to safety, to public spaces, right? Absolutely,
and that's what pains me in the United States is that those elections, for example, that involve national elections, a presidential election going on, the turnout is much higher, ironically, compared to local elections, where the national elections have sort of a trickle-down effect on the residents. Local elections have direct impact on the residents. But of course, there's no glamour, there's no glitz associated with local elections. But as you said, yes, decisions made by a local municipality or neighborhood council, in case of Los Angeles, or Yerevan has that also, the hamanks, right? The neighborhoods. That impacts them directly. So that should be the process that involves the residents the most.
All politics
is local.
There you go.
Absolutely.
I want to ask a question. Just perhaps it's a personal pet peeve, but I find that living in Yerevan, walking down any street, I feel like I'm being filmed at every second. There are the speed cameras, there are security cameras. Every couple of 100 meters, when you're driving in the city, there's the cameras everywhere. Is this a normal practice, for example, in a city like Glendale, to have those cameras everywhere?
So let's split this into two components.
Okay.
One is technology progress, the security component of it. From what I understand, London is basically every nook and cranny is being filmed in the city of London.
Right, but now there's a huge thing in London, outcry. Right. Now they're actually dismantling some of those cameras.
And LA County experienced that in the sense where when they started involving the red light cameras to record and therefore penalize those individuals who were breaking traffic laws, there were several lawsuits filed as a result of which red light cameras are removed. They're gone. They're gone because they violate privacy issues. But from what I understand here, it's just not only is it numerically it's absurd, but it's also punitive in nature. It's not preventative. It's not there to, we did a traffic analysis, an engineering analysis, and it showed that on this intersection, traffic's being broken the most. So therefore, we decided to install red light cameras to use administrative measures, improve the situation. No, here it's, let's create enough speed traps and violation traps so that we can generate revenue. And another problem is that from what I understand, the revenue doesn't go to the city. It
70% goes to
a private entity. I mean, that just, I don't understand that, how that can be. How can a city cut a deal with a private entity where it doesn't get the lion's share of whatever's left over after costs?
Yeah, I could perhaps explain it, but I better not.
I know what the answer is, of course.
I think we all do, yeah.
It shouldn't be.
Okay, let's just switch gears for a second and return back to Glendale for a second. How was the Armenian community's support for your election, for your candidacy as mayor?
I have to judge by the election results. I mean, the people decide. People decided to elect me to city council, and then the council that initially a lot of the well-established council members were rabidly against me. They voted to elect me mayor. So I figured it was okay. It was sufficient for me to be elected mayor. And again, it's an ongoing thing. I don't take it for granted. If anything, becoming mayor has put more responsibility on my shoulders. I have more difficulty saying no to public groups, NGOs, and because there's so much going on in a city of size of 200,000 people, and you are the mayor of the entire city, even any segment that didn't support you or worked actively against you. So you have to work with them, work for them, because they are your residents.
And what are how long is your term for?
The mayorship is actually for a year.
Okay.
Every year there's a repeat election for mayors. The term for council is 4 years, so I have another 2.5.
So the mayor is elected from the council?
From the council. Council elects the mayor. And it's not an automatic thing. There has to be consensus, well, at least a majority on the council to elect a mayor. And I was elected by four votes for and 1 abstained. And the abstention was a funny one because the council member who's been on the council for 19 years and is 70-some years old, said that I'm sure Zareh is going to be a great mayor, but I think he lacks the experience. So I was going to be a great mayor who lacked the experience. Anyway.
I mean, there you go.
Yeah. So,
sort of contradictory
okay.
comments, but that's fine. So what are some of the projects or challenges that you are looking forward to when you return back after your brief visit here to Armenia?
The challenges or the projects that we work on is Glendale is currently undergoing a major construction boom, major development, which is ironic because a certain California statewide entity that dealt with promoting growth in the state of California has disappeared. It was called the Redevelopment Agency. But despite that, Glendale has become very attractive to investments, and currently we have something like 3,000 units going up just in downtown Glendale. And Glendale's actively turning into a popular sort of internal tourism spot like Pasadena is, and Burbank is to a lesser extent. To make sure that that boom is measured and controlled and it doesn't result in too much disturbance in the daily lives of the residents is a challenge, but I think one that we can handle quite easily. A major issue actually that we face, and I guess it's going to take a lot of work to address it, is traffic fatalities in the city of Glendale.
Yeah, recently,
despite hit and runs, well, just fatalities resulting. You know, Glendale is known as one of the, consistently, every year for the last 10 years, we are one of the top 10 safest cities in the United States. Last year we were the safest mid-sized city in the United States. Yet we have a really bad traffic record. In the last 14 months we've lost 9 people to traffic accidents. 8 of 9 are Armenians.
No kidding.
8 of 9 are elderly. 2 are cyclists, 7 are pedestrians. So it's a serious problem for a safe city like ours, and we're trying, but it's basically a factor of sort of a cultural issues, because it's always the elderly wearing gray clothes, no reflective lighting on anything on their clothes, and they hold their heads down when they walk. They assume that just because it's a walkway, the car is going to stop, which is not always the case. Like the last fatality was, the pedestrian was not at fault, which usually is the case actually. The pedestrian was just hit and struck by a car, not going too fast, but
fast enough
to kill him. And they're all elderlies, like I said. So the range goes from what, 55 years to 86 years old. We're working on that. We have a housing issue, low-income housing issue. And why is Glendale different from LA? Because LA has rent control. Glendale is considered more affluent, so we don't have rent control. It's a cultural thing.
When you keep talking about a cultural thing, is this the Armenian factor here?
Well, the previous one was the Armenian factor. This one is the sort of old Glendale culture, meaning it's a bedroom community. People would work in downtown. They would come to a nicer place to live. To spend their nights. So rent control never really kicked in. It's not an issue that's palatable. I would argue most of Glendale residents, which makes us more dependent on federal HUD funding for Section 8 and low-income elderly housing and stuff like that. That's actually a major issue because, ironically, while we are an affluent city, we do have a large migrant population that's aging, and there are residents. They need to be taken care of. At least that's the way I feel. So I actually put a lot of accent in it. Yeah, I put a lot of emphasis on that issue.
And just as a final question, the Armenian sort of factor in Glendale. You say Glendale, and automatically, for Armenians anywhere in the world, you know that it's. You think all of Glendale is populated by Armenians. You do have a large influx of Armenians coming still from Armenia.
We do. We've experienced several waves. The last 6 years, we've had a wave from Iran after the U.S. sanctions, followed by a wave from Armenia and from Syria also. But the wave coming from Armenia there was an interruption for a while, about 4 or 5 years when you would hardly get any newcomers. But as of the last 4 years, you're getting more and more and more coming, and I don't see an end to the flow so far.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to also address their needs, I'm sure.
It is, and they have, they need to be integrated. At the same time, they don't want to be cut off from their cultural roots. So it's quite complex. And Glendale is attractive because there is that cushion, you know, the cultural.
Right. They don't need to necessarily learn how to speak English right away because the store owners and the restaurants and the businesses are mostly owned and operated by Armenians, I presume. Right. Well, Zareh Sinanyan, you have a full plate and a lot of work dealing with a city the size of Glendale. I want to thank you for coming to CivilNet, talking to us, and hopefully there are some lessons that we can take away from what you do.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are working hard, like you and those involved in CivilNet, trying to improve the situation for everyone that's in Armenia and those that are not in Armenia that would like to be in Armenia in the future.
Well, we'd like to see them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest today was Zareh Sinanyan. He is the mayor of Glendale, California. Thank you for watching CivilNet.